The blood bloomed dark against the pale dirt, spreading in a pattern that looked almost deliberate, and Clara Morrison knew with absolute certainty that she was going to die alone in this God-forsaken stretch of Colorado wilderness. The pain in her ribs felt like someone had driven railroad spikes through her chest and twisted them for good measure. She could not draw a full breath without stars exploding behind her eyelids. The horse that had kicked her, a temperamental gray mare she had been foolish enough to approach from behind, was long gone now, disappeared over the ridge with the rest of the wild herd she had been tracking. Clara had been photographing them, or trying to. The new trade of wildlife photography had brought her all the way from Boston to Colorado in the summer of 1885, chasing stories and images that Eastern newspapers were hungry for. Her camera lay smashed 10 feet away, the glass plates shattered, her livelihood destroyed along with several of her ribs. She tried to move and immediately regretted it. The world tilted sideways and her vision narrowed to a pinpoint. Through the roaring in her ears, she heard hoofbeats. Just one horse, moving at a steady pace. Clara wanted to call out but could not summon enough air. She lay there bleeding and broken, watching the sky turn from blue to white as shock began to set in. The hoofbeats stopped. Boots hit the ground with a soft thud. Then a shadow fell across her face, blocking out the merciless August sun. "Jesus Christ!" The voice was male, rough with alarm. "Madam, can you hear me?" Clara managed to focus on the face above her. Tanned skin, dark stubble along a strong jaw, and eyes the color of good whiskey catching sunlight. He looked to be in his late 20s, maybe 30 at most. A cowboy, clearly, from the worn leather chaps and the bandana around his neck dusty from the trail. "Horse," she managed to whisper. "Kicked. I can see that." He was already kneeling beside her, hands moving over her with surprising gentleness, assessing the damage. When his fingers found her ribs on the left side, she screamed. It was a thin, reedy sound that embarrassed her even through the pain. Sorry. His hand retreated. "Broken ribs for certain, maybe 3 or 4 of them from the feel of it. We need to get you stabilized before we can move you." He stood and she wanted to beg him not to leave, but he was only going to his horse. He returned with saddlebags and a bedroll, kneeling beside her again. "My name is Ryder Ashford," he said, his voice calm and steady in a way that made her breathing ease slightly. "I work the Double J Ranch about 15 miles south of here. I need to bind those ribs before we can get you anywhere. It is going to hurt like hell, but if we do not do it, you might puncture a lung when we move you. Do you understand?" Clara nodded. She understood. She also understood that she had no choice but to trust this stranger completely. "What is your name?" he asked, pulling items from his saddlebag. "Clara Morrison." "Well, Miss Morrison, I am not going to lie to you. This is going to be bad." He had strips of cloth now, torn from what looked like an old shirt. "I need you to try to sit up a bit. I will help you." His arm slid behind her shoulders, supporting her weight as he carefully lifted her. Clara bit down on her lip hard enough to taste blood, trying not to scream again. The world spun violently. "That is it. You're doing fine," Ryder said. His voice was close to her ear, anchoring her. "Just a little more." He worked quickly and efficiently, wrapping the cloth strips around her ribcage tight enough to immobilize the broken bones, but not so tight she could not breathe at all. His hands were calloused but careful, and he apologized every time she whimpered. When he was done, he eased her back down, and she found she could breathe slightly easier, though every inhalation still felt like broken glass. "Thank you," she whispered. "Do not thank me yet. We still need to get you to town." He studied her face, his expression concerned. "Breckenridge is the closest settlement, about 18 miles northeast. There's a doctor there of sorts. Can you ride?" Clara looked at him, looked at the vast emptiness around them, looked at the blood still seeping through her torn dress. "I do not think I have much choice." Something that might have been respect flickered in those amber eyes. "No, madam, I suppose you do not." He brought his horse over, a sturdy bay gelding that stood patient and calm while Ryder figured out the logistics of getting Clara into the saddle. In the end, he mounted first, then reached down and lifted her up with a strength that suggested he was used to handling much heavier loads than one slight woman. She cried out as the movement jarred her ribs, but then she was settled in front of him, his arms coming around her to hold the reins and the solid warmth of his chest against her back. "I have got you," he said quietly. "Just try to relax against me. Let me take your weight." They set out at a walk, Ryder keeping the pace steady but gentle. Even so, every step the horse took sent fresh waves of agony through Clara's torso. She gritted her teeth and tried not to make any sound, but after the first mile, she could not help the small gasps and whimpers that escaped her. "Talk to me," Ryder said. His breath stirred the hair that had come loose from her bun. "Tell me about Boston. Tell me what a city woman is doing out here alone." She understood what he was doing, distraction, but she was grateful for it nonetheless. "I'm a photographer," she managed. "Wildlife photography. There's a market for it back east. People want to see the frontier, but most of them will never come this far west themselves. So you came all this way to take pictures of wild horses? And elk? And bears if I could find them from a safe distance, and the mountains, all of it." She paused, breathing carefully. "My camera is destroyed." "I saw. I'm sorry. It cost me nearly everything I had." "We will figure something out," he said, and the certainty in his voice made her want to believe him, even though he was a stranger and had no reason to care about her problems beyond keeping her alive. "Why are you out here?" she asked. "The Double J Ranch is south, you said. This is pretty far from there." "I was tracking strays. Found some evidence of rustlers working the area, so I have been riding a wider circuit than usual." His arms tightened slightly around her as the horse picked its way down a rocky slope. "Lucky for you I did." "Lucky," she agreed weakly. Then, because the pain was making her lightheaded and she could not seem to stop herself, she asked, "Are you married?" She felt him go still behind her. "That's a forward question." "I'm half dead and in your arms. I think we are past propriety." He actually laughed, a low rumble she felt more than heard. "Fair enough. No, madam, I am not married. Never found a woman willing to put up with a cowboy's life." "And you?" "No husband, no prospects. I am 24 and firmly on the shelf, according to my mother." 24 is not old. "It is in Boston society." "Well, this is not Boston." They fell silent for a while. The sun climbed higher, turning the morning air hot and dry. Clara felt herself drifting, the combination of pain and shock pulling her toward unconsciousness. "Stay with me, Clara," Ryder's voice cut through the fog. "Do not fall asleep. I need you to stay awake. Talk to me more. Tell me about your family." She forced her eyes open. 2 younger sisters, both married. Father's a banker. Mother is a professional worrier. They think I am insane for coming out here. Are they right? Probably. She drew a careful breath. But I could not stay there anymore. Could not stand the idea of marrying some banker's son and spending my life hosting dinner parties and doing needlework. I wanted something more, something real. This real enough for you? There was no mockery in the question, just genuine curiosity. "Yes," she said, and meant it. "Even this, even bleeding and broken. At least I am living my own life on my own terms." "That's a rare thing," Ryder said quietly. "Man or woman, most people do not have that kind of courage." Clara closed her eyes against a wave of pain. "I do not feel very courageous right now." "You're still breathing and talking. That takes courage." They continued on through the morning, the landscape gradually changing around them as they descended from the higher ranges toward the valley where Breckenridge sat, nestled among the mountains. The mining town had sprung up during the gold rush years, and though the easy gold was long gone, the town remained, sustained now by cattle ranching and lumber operations. Clara faded in and out of awareness as they rode. Sometimes she opened her eyes to find the sun in a different position. Sometimes she surfaced to find Ryder talking to her, his voice a steady stream of words that pulled her back from the darkness. He told her about growing up in Texas, about coming to Colorado 5 years ago to work cattle. He told her about the Double J Ranch and its owner, Jim Jenkins, who treated his men fair and paid them honest wages. He told her about the mountains in winter, when the snow came down so thick you could not see your hand in front of your face. "Almost there," he said at one point, and Clara struggled to focus. In the distance, she could see buildings, the town. They had made it. "Good," she whispered. "That is good." "You are going to be all right," Ryder said. "I promise you." She wanted to tell him that he could not promise such things, that life was too uncertain and death too hungry. But before she could form the words, the darkness rose up and claimed her. Clara woke in a bed, which was surprising. She had expected to wake on a hard wooden table in some frontier doctor's office, if she woke at all. Instead, she was lying in an actual bed with clean white sheets and a soft pillow under her head. The pain in her ribs had not diminished, but it had changed somehow, become more focused. She drew a careful breath and found it slightly easier than before. Easy now, a woman's voice, kind but brisk. Clara turned her head to find a middle-aged woman in a simple dress sitting in a chair beside the bed. She had graying hair pulled back in a practical bun and the weathered face of someone who had spent years on the frontier. "You have been out for about 6 hours. The doctor gave you laudanum for the pain. You will likely be fuzzy for a while yet." "Where am I?" "My boarding house. I'm Margaret Patterson. The cowboy who brought you in, Ryder Ashford, he paid for a room for you. The doctor examined you thoroughly. 4 broken ribs on your left side, severe bruising, and you had lost quite a bit of blood. But no internal bleeding that the doctor could find, thank the Lord. You are very lucky to be alive." Clara processed this slowly through the laudanum haze. "Where is he, Ryder?" "He left a few hours ago, had to get back to his ranch, but he said he would check on you when he could." Margaret stood and poured water from a pitcher into a glass. She helped Clara sit up slightly, supporting her shoulders while she sipped. "He was very worried about you, barely left your side while the doctor worked." Something warm unfurled in Clara's chest that had nothing to do with the laudanum. "He saved my life." "That he did. Found you and brought you all the way in, 18 miles with you half dead in his arms. That is not nothing." Margaret eased her back down onto the pillows. "Now, is there anyone you need me to telegraph? Family back east?" Clara thought about her mother receiving news that her eldest daughter had been kicked by a horse in the Colorado wilderness. "Not yet. Let me get my bearings first. I do not want to worry them unnecessarily." Margaret nodded, though her expression suggested she thought Clara's family deserved to know. "Well, you rest then. Doctor said you need to stay in bed at least 2 weeks, preferably 3. Those ribs need time to knit, and you absolutely cannot do any heavy lifting or straining for at least 2 months. 2 months! Clara felt panic rising in her chest. Her camera was destroyed. She had minimal savings left. She could not afford 2 months of boarding house fees, and even if she could, what would she do afterward? How could she work without her equipment? As if reading her mind, Margaret patted her hand. "Do not fret about payment right now. Ryder left enough to cover the first week. We will figure out the rest as we go. The Lord provides, child. You will see." But Clara had never been good at faith. She had always been the practical one, the planner. And right now, her carefully constructed life plan lay in pieces, as shattered as her camera. She slept again, drifting on the laudanum's tide. When she woke, it was evening, the room filled with long shadows. Margaret brought her broth and bread, helping her eat. Every movement hurt, but the food helped clear some of the fog from her mind. Over the next few days, Clara learned the rhythms of the boarding house. Margaret had 5 other rooms, currently occupied by a railroad surveyor, a traveling salesman, a widow who worked at the general store, and 2 miners trying their luck at a claim up in the hills. They were a quiet lot, respectful, and they all seemed curious about the Eastern photographer who had nearly died in the wilderness. The doctor, a man named Horace Sutton who had practiced medicine in Denver before retiring to the quieter life of Breckenridge, visited daily. He checked her ribs, changed her bandages, and asked questions about her pain and her breathing. He was competent and kind, if somewhat gruff. "You are healing well," he told her on the 4th day. "Better than I expected, honestly. You are young and strong, which helps. But you need to keep resting. No getting up and wandering around yet." Clara, who had been contemplating trying to reach the privy by herself rather than continuing to use the bedpan, nodded obediently. It was on the 5th day that Ryder came back. Clara heard his voice downstairs, that low, rough rumble she remembered from the ride into town. Her heart did something complicated in her chest that she told herself was just a side effect of the injury and medication. Then Margaret was showing him upstairs, and he was standing in her doorway, hat in his hands, looking uncertain in a way he definitely had not looked when he was binding her ribs and saving her life. "Miss Morrison," he said, "I hope I am not intruding." "You saved my life," Clara said. "I think that entitles you to visit." She gestured at the chair beside the bed. "Please sit." He did, his long frame folding into the chair that suddenly seemed too small. He looked clean now, freshly shaved, his hair still damp from a recent wash. He wore different clothes, a clean shirt and trousers, no chaps. He looked younger somehow, less like the rough cowboy who had found her bleeding in the dirt. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Yeah, like I was kicked by a horse," she said, then managed a weak smile. "But alive, thanks to you. I do not think I properly thanked you. So thank you. For everything. You do not need to thank me. Anyone would have done the same." "But it was not anyone. It was you." She studied his face, the strong bones in the eyes that looked almost golden in the evening light. "I am told you paid for my room, for the doctor. I will pay you back as soon as I am able. That is not necessary. It is to me. I do not take charity." Something shifted in his expression. Not offense exactly, but recognition. "All right. Pay me back when you can. No rush." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Ryder said, "I brought you something." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out several glass plates, carefully wrapped in cloth. "I went back out to where I found you. I gathered up what I could salvage from your camera. Most of the plates were broken, but these few survived. I do not know if they are any good, but I thought you would want them." Clara took the plates with trembling hands, 3 of them, miraculously unbroken. She held one up to the light and saw the image captured there, reversed and ghostly. The wild horse herd running free across the high meadow. She had gotten the shot just before she had been foolish enough to approach too close. "Thank you," she whispered, and this time the words were weighted with real emotion. "You have no idea what this means." "I have some idea." He shifted in his chair. "I also asked around town. There is a photographer here, runs a studio on Main Street, fellow named Charles Hewitt. He does mostly portraits and town documentation, but he has the equipment. I thought maybe you could work out some arrangement with him to develop those plates, or maybe to use his equipment until you can replace yours." Clara stared at him. This man, this cowboy who had every reason to ride away after depositing her at the doctor's office and never think of her again, had instead spent his time trying to salvage her work and find her a way forward. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. Ryder met her eyes steadily. "Because you remind me of someone." "Who?" "Myself. 5 years ago, when I first came to Colorado with nothing but a horse and a saddle and a whole lot of hope. People helped me then. I'm just passing it forward." But Clara thought there might be more to it than that. She saw the way his eyes lingered on her face, the way his expression softened when he looked at her. Unless she was very much mistaken, or the laudanum was affecting her judgment, Ryder Ashford was interested in her as more than just a charitable cause. The thought should have alarmed her. She had not come west to find romance. She had come to build a career, to prove that a woman could make her own way in the world without a husband to support her. But looking at Ryder now, remembering the feel of his arms around her and his voice pulling her back from the edge of darkness, she found she was not alarmed at all. "Will you come visit again?" she asked. "If you want me to." "I do." He smiled then, a real smile that transformed his whole face, and Clara felt her breath catch in a way that had nothing to do with broken ribs. Over the next 2 weeks, Ryder became a regular visitor. He came every few days, timing his visits to coincide with his trips into town for ranch supplies. He would sit in the chair beside her bed, and they would talk for hours. He told her about his life on the ranch, the hard work and long hours, but also the satisfaction of it, the freedom of riding across open land with nothing but sky above and earth below. She told him about Boston, about growing up in a world of rigid social rules and suffocating expectations, about discovering photography and realizing it could be her way out. "I had a teacher," she said one afternoon, Mrs. Aldrich. She had been a photographer herself before she married, and even after, she kept her equipment and her darkroom. She taught lessons to young ladies, supposedly as a genteel hobby, but she taught me it could be more than that. She showed me photographs from all over the world and said that every picture tells a story that words cannot capture. I was 16 when I first looked through a camera lens, and it was like I could finally see clearly for the first time in my life. "That is how I feel on horseback," Ryder said. "Like everything makes sense in a way it does not otherwise." Exactly. They discovered other similarities too. Both loved the mountains, the way the peaks caught the light at dawn and dusk. Both had left behind families that did not quite understand them. Both valued independence fiercely, sometimes to their own detriment. "I am not always easy to get along with," Clara admitted. "I can be stubborn and prideful. My mother always said I needed to learn to bend more, to compromise." "Bending is not always the answer," Ryder said. "Sometimes you need to stand firm. Otherwise, you will wake up one day and realize you have bent yourself into someone you do not even recognize." Is that the voice of experience? Maybe. I almost stayed in Texas, working my father's ranch. It was expected, but it was not my life. It was his. Coming here was the first real choice I ever made for myself. Clara reached out and touched his hand where it rested on the arm of the chair. "I am glad you made that choice." He turned his hand over, his calloused palm warm against her fingers. They stayed like that, hands linked, until Margaret called up the stairs that supper was ready and Ryder needed to let Clara rest. By the third week, Clara was finally allowed out of bed for short periods. She felt weak as a newborn foal, her legs shaky and her ribs still aching with every movement. But it felt like freedom to walk to the window and look out at the mountains, to sit in a chair rather than being confined to bed. Ryder took her to meet Charles Hewitt, the town photographer. Hewitt was a small, precise man in his 50s, with wire-rimmed glasses and ink-stained fingers. His studio was cramped but well-organized, and when Clara showed him her salvaged plates and explained her situation, his face lit up with genuine interest. "Wild horses," he said, studying the images through a magnifying glass. "These are remarkable. The composition, the sense of movement. You have a real eye, Miss Morrison." "Thank you," Clara said, trying not to let the praise go to her head. "I was wondering if you might have use for an assistant. I could help with developing, with portrait sessions. I need to save money for new equipment, and I thought maybe we could work out an arrangement." Hewitt considered this. "I could use help, it is true, and in exchange for your labor, you could use my darkroom for your own projects, plus a small wage. Would that suit you?" It was more than Clara had hoped for. "That would suit me perfectly." They shook on it, and as they left the studio, Ryder said, "See? I told you things would work out." "You have an annoying habit of being right," Clara said, but she was smiling. "I will add it to my list of charms." She laughed, and even though it hurt her ribs, it felt good. Clara started working for Hewitt as soon as the doctor cleared her for light activity. The work was different from her wildlife photography, but no less engaging. She learned the art of portrait lighting, how to position subjects to capture their best angles, how to put nervous clients at ease. And in the evenings, after the studio closed, she would work in the darkroom developing her own images from before the accident, printing them carefully, watching the pictures emerge from the chemical baths like ghosts becoming solid. She sold several prints to the local newspaper, which ran a story about the wild horses still roaming the high country. The Denver papers picked it up, and suddenly, Clara Morrison was not just the foolish Eastern woman who got herself kicked by a horse. She was a serious photographer documenting the vanishing frontier. Through it all, Ryder was a constant presence. He came to town whenever he could, which was not as often as either of them would have liked. Ranch work was demanding, especially as summer turned toward autumn and the cattle needed to be moved to lower pastures. But he made time, and Clara found herself looking forward to his visits with an intensity that both thrilled and terrified her. They went on walks through town, Clara moving slowly at first, then with increasing strength as her ribs healed. They had dinner at the town's modest restaurant. They sat on the boarding house porch in the evenings and watched the stars come out while Margaret pretended not to be chaperoning from the kitchen window. "I should warn you," Clara said one evening in late September. "I'm not looking to get married. I know that is probably what you are thinking, courting and all that. But I need to be honest with you. I have worked too hard for my independence to give it up." Ryder was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I am not asking you to give up anything. I am just asking to be part of your life, however that looks. Most men would not accept that. I am not most men." "No," Clara agreed, looking at his profile in the starlight. "You are not." He turned to face her, his expression serious. "Clara, I am going to be honest with you too. I am falling in love with you. Maybe I have been since I found you bleeding in the dirt. Maybe it happened even faster than that. But I need you to know that I do not expect anything from you except what you are willing to give. If you want to keep working, keep taking your pictures, keep being independent, then that is what we will do. I am not interested in changing you. I like you exactly as you are." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. No one had ever said anything like that to her before. Every man she had ever known, including her own father, had expected her to conform to some idea of what a woman should be. But Ryder was offering something entirely different. He was offering partnership, respect, freedom. "I am falling in love with you too," she whispered. "It terrifies me." "Why?" "Because what if I am not good at it? What if I am too selfish, too focused on my work? What if I disappoint you?" Ryder reached over and took her hand. "You could not disappoint me if you tried, and for what it is worth, I think you will be brilliant at love, because you do everything with your whole heart. I have seen it in your work, in the way you talk about your photography. You do not do anything halfway." "Neither do you," she said. "Then we are well matched." He leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted to. She did not want to. When his lips met hers, it was gentle at first, careful of her still healing ribs, but then Clara made a soft sound in the back of her throat and pressed closer, and the kiss deepened into something that made her forget about pain entirely. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Ryder rested his forehead against hers. "Clara Morrison, you are going to be the death of me. I thought I was the one who almost died. You did. But I'm beginning to think I am in far more danger than you ever were." She laughed and kissed him again. Winter came to the Colorado high country with a vengeance. The first snow fell in early October, dusting the peaks white and sending a chill through the valley. Clara worked steadily at the photography studio, building up her savings and her portfolio. She took advantage of every free moment to explore the area with her camera, now borrowed from Hewitt until she could afford her own. She photographed the changing seasons, the way the aspen leaves turned gold before falling, the first heavy snows that blanketed the town. And she saw Ryder whenever possible. It was harder now with winter settling in. The ranch was 20 miles away, and that distance became treacherous when the snow started falling in earnest. Sometimes 2 weeks would pass between visits, but when he did make it to town, Clara felt like she could breathe properly again. "This is ridiculous," she told Margaret one evening in late November. "I'm a modern woman. I should not be pining away waiting for a man to visit." "Love makes fools of us all, dear," Margaret said placidly, "even modern women." The first major blizzard of the season struck in early December, dumping 3 feet of snow on Breckenridge and cutting the town off from the outside world for nearly a week. Clara spent the time in the darkroom, developing and printing, trying not to worry about Ryder out on the ranch. The Double J was well run and prepared for winter, she knew that. But still, she worried. When the snow finally stopped and the roads were passable again, Clara was at the studio when she heard commotion outside. She looked out the window to see Ryder riding down Main Street on his bay gelding, both of them covered in snow, looking half frozen. She ran outside without even grabbing her coat. "Ryder, what are you doing here? You should not have ridden in this weather." He dismounted stiffly, and she could see he was exhausted. "I needed to see you, needed to know you were all right. I'm fine, but you are frozen solid." She took his arm, feeling how cold he was even through his heavy coat. "Come on, let us get you inside and warmed up." She brought him to the boarding house where Margaret took one look at him and immediately set about making hot coffee and soup. Clara sat Ryder by the fire and helped him out of his wet outer layers, her hands efficient but gentle. "You are an idiot," she said. "You could have gotten lost in the snow. You could have frozen to death." "I know." He caught her hands in his, holding them against his chest. Even through his shirt she could feel the steady beat of his heart. "But I love you, Clara. And being away from you during that storm, not knowing if you were safe, it drove me half mad. I realized something." "What?" "I do not want to spend another winter apart from you. I do not want to count the days between visits. I want to wake up every morning knowing you are there. I want to build a life with you." Clara's heart was pounding. "What are you saying?" "I am saying marry me. Not because you have to, not because society expects it, but because we want to build something together. We can figure out the details. You can keep working, keep taking your pictures. We will make it work however we need to. I just want you, Clara. Any way I can have you." She looked at this man who had saved her life, who had respected her ambitions, who had ridden through a blizzard just to make sure she was safe. She thought about all the reasons she had been so determined never to marry. The loss of autonomy, the expectation that she would give up her own dreams to support someone else's, the fear of becoming invisible. But Ryder was not offering any of those things. He was offering partnership. He was offering love without conditions. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you." He pulled her into his arms, careful of her ribs even though they were long-heeled now, and kissed her like she was the answer to every question he had ever asked. They were married 3 weeks later, on Christmas Eve. It was a small ceremony in the church on Main Street, with Margaret and Charles Hewitt as witnesses, and a handful of townspeople who had come to care about the Eastern photographer and the cowboy who loved her. Clara wore a simple dress of deep blue wool, practical and pretty. Ryder wore his best suit, which he admitted he had owned for 5 years and worn exactly twice. The minister, an elderly man named Reverend Holmes, performed the service with quiet dignity. When it came time for the vows, Clara looked into Ryder's eyes and promised to love him, to stand beside him, to build a life together that honored both their dreams. And Ryder promised the same, his voice steady and sure, when the minister pronounced them husband and wife. Ryder kissed her gently, and Clara felt something settle in her chest that she had not even realized was restless. This was right. This was home. They spent their first night as a married couple in Clara's room at the boarding house, which would be their home until they figured out more permanent arrangements. Margaret had decorated the room with pine boughs and candles, making it festive and warm. "I have something for you," Ryder said after they had gotten ready for bed. He pulled a wrapped package from his bag. "I wanted to wait until tonight to give it to you." Clara unwrapped it carefully and found herself staring at a camera. Not new, but well-maintained, a solid field camera that would serve her needs perfectly. "Ryder," she breathed, "this must have cost you months of wages." "It did, but you need your own equipment. You should not have to keep borrowing Hewitt's." He touched her cheek gently. "I want you to be able to do your work, Clara. It is important. You are important." She set the camera down carefully and then threw her arms around him, holding him tight. "I love you so much. I love you too." They made love that night slowly and carefully, learning each other's bodies with patience and wonder. Clara had been nervous, her only knowledge of marital relations coming from whispered conversations with married friends and a very uncomfortable talk with her mother before she left Boston. But with Ryder, it felt natural, felt right. He was gentle with her, attentive to her responses, and when they finally came together, it was perfect in its imperfection, tender and real. Afterward, lying in his arms with her head on his chest, Clara said, "I never thought I could have this. I thought I had to choose between love and my work." "You never have to choose," Ryder said, his fingers running through her hair. "Not with me." They spent the winter working out the practicalities of their new life together. Clara continued working at Hewitt's studio, and she also began taking commissions of her own, using her new camera to document ranch life, town events, and the stunning Colorado landscape. Ryder suggested she could come out to the Double J and photograph the ranch operations, and she jumped at the chance. The first time Clara visited the Double J, she fell in love with it immediately. The ranch sprawled across a valley with the mountains rising on all sides, dramatic and beautiful. The ranch house was a long, low building of timber and stone, practical but handsome. Jim Jenkins, the owner, was a gruff man in his 60s who eyed Clara with initial skepticism, but warmed to her when he saw how competent she was with a camera. "You are welcome here any time, Mrs. Ashford," he said. "Ryder is one of my best men. Anyone he cares about is welcome." Clara spent 3 days photographing the ranch, capturing the daily rhythms of cattle work, the camaraderie among the cowhands, the harsh beauty of winter ranching. When she showed the finished prints to Jenkins, he was so impressed that he commissioned a full series to document the ranch's operations, paying her enough that she could finally afford to buy additional equipment and supplies. "You know," Ryder said one evening as they sat together in front of the fire in the ranch bunkhouse, "there is a foreman's cabin that sits empty. Jenkins offered it to me years ago, but I never took him up on it, because I did not need that much space just for myself. But if you think you could stand living out here, away from town, we could make it ours. It would need work, but it has good bones." Clara looked at him. "Could I still work? Still take my photographs?" "Of course. You could set up a darkroom in one of the outbuildings, and you would be free to travel whenever you needed to for your work. I trust you, Clara. I know you will always come back." The cabin was indeed in need of work. It had 2 rooms and a loft with a stone fireplace and windows that faced east toward the mountains, but Clara could see its potential. With some cleaning and repairs, it could be a real home. They spent the early spring fixing it up. Ryder did most of the heavy work, repairing the roof and replacing broken window panes, while Clara scrubbed and painted and made curtains. She set up her darkroom in a small shed behind the cabin, carefully arranging her chemicals and trays and making it light-tight. By the time the wildflowers started blooming in the meadows, the cabin was ready. Moving in felt momentous. Clara arranged her few belongings, her books and her photography equipment, alongside Ryder's sparse possessions. She hung her best prints on the walls, images of wild horses and mountain landscapes. Ryder built shelves for her books and a sturdy table where she could work on her prints. "It is perfect," Clara said, standing in the doorway and looking out at the view of the mountains. "I cannot believe this is our home." Ryder came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist. "Believe it, we built this together." Life on the ranch was harder than Clara had anticipated, but also more rewarding. She learned the rhythms of ranch work, the early mornings and long days, the constant cycle of tending to animals and land. She also learned that she loved it, loved the simplicity and honesty of it, loved watching Ryder in his element, confident and capable on horseback. She continued her photography work, balancing it with the demands of ranch life. She photographed everything: the spring calving season, the summer roundup, the autumn cattle drives to market. Her images began appearing in magazines and newspapers back east, each one accompanied by her written accounts of frontier life. She was building a reputation as a serious documentary photographer, one of the few women working in the field. "You are going to be famous," Ryder teased one evening as they sat together on the porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains pink and gold. "I do not want to be famous. I just want to do good work." "You are doing that." He squeezed her hand. "I'm proud of you. I hope you know that." "I do, and I'm proud of you too. You are an amazing cowboy. Jenkins told me the other day that you are the best horseman he has ever had working for him." "He said that?" "He did. You should accept that foreman position he has been offering you." Ryder had indeed been offered the foreman's job, which came with more responsibility and better pay, but he had been hesitant to accept, worried it would take time away from Clara. "Are you sure?" he asked. "It would mean longer hours sometimes, more time away." "I am sure. Ryder, you deserve this, and I'm not going anywhere. We will make it work, just like we always do." He accepted the job the next day, and Clara watched with pride as he grew into the role. He was a natural leader, fair and firm with the men under him, respected by everyone on the ranch. Summer turned to autumn, and one morning in late October, Clara woke feeling queasy. At first, she thought it was something she had eaten, but when the nausea persisted for several days, Margaret, who had come out to visit, took one look at her and smiled knowingly. "When was your last monthly?" Margaret asked. Clara had to think about it. With everything going on, she had not been paying attention, but now that she considered it, she realized she was late. Very late. "Oh," she said softly. "Oh." "Congratulations, dear," Margaret said, hugging her. "You are going to be a mother." Clara felt a rush of emotions so complex she could not untangle them. Joy, fear, excitement, uncertainty. She had not planned for this, had not really thought much about children. She and Ryder had been so focused on building their life together, on their work, that the possibility of a baby had seemed distant and abstract. But now it was real. And as she pressed her hand to her still flat stomach, Clara found that she was happy. Scared, but happy. She told Ryder that evening, nervous about his reaction, but she need not have worried. His face lit up like she had given him the greatest gift in the world. "A baby," he said wonderingly. "We are going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" Clara asked. "I know we did not plan for this so soon. Happy does not even begin to cover it." He pulled her into his arms, holding her gently. "Clara, you have given me everything I never knew I wanted. A home, love, purpose, and now a child. How could I be anything but happy?" They spent the winter preparing for the baby's arrival. Ryder built a cradle from pine wood, sanding it smooth and carving small horses into the headboard. Clara sewed tiny clothes and blankets, her hands surprisingly deft with a needle despite her lack of practice. Margaret came out regularly, bringing advice and supplies and her steady, calming presence. The baby came in early April, during a late spring snowstorm. Margaret and the town doctor Sutton made it to the ranch just in time. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Clara thought she might not survive it. But Ryder stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand, talking to her, giving her strength when she had none left. And then, just as dawn was breaking, the baby arrived. A boy, healthy and howling with indignation at being born. "He has your lungs," Ryder said, tears streaming down his face as he held his son for the first time. "And your temper, I'm guessing." "My temper is perfectly reasonable," Clara said weakly, but she was smiling. "Let me see him." They named him Robert James Ashford, after both their fathers. He was a serious baby, with Ryder's dark hair and Clara's gray eyes. Clara fell in love with him instantly and completely, a fierce, protective love she had not known she was capable of. But she also struggled. The reality of motherhood was harder than she had anticipated. The sleepless nights, the constant demands, the way her body felt foreign and exhausted. And more than that, she struggled with the fear that she was losing herself, that the independent woman she had fought so hard to become was disappearing beneath the weight of diapers and feedings and endless crying. "I feel like I am drowning," she confessed to Ryder one night when Robert was 3 months old, and Clara had not slept more than a few hours at a time in weeks. "I love him so much, but I do not know who I am anymore. I've not picked up my camera in months. I've not worked on a single print. I'm just a mother now, and I do not know if that is enough." Ryder listened quietly, then said, "Tomorrow, I am taking the day off. I'm going to watch Robert, and you are going to take your camera and go out. Spend the whole day doing what you love, and we are going to do that every week from now on. You do not stop being Clara just because you are also Robert's mother. You are both, and you need both parts of yourself to be whole." "What if I am being selfish?" Clara asked. "What kind of mother wants to escape from her own child?" "The human kind." "Clara, you are allowed to need time for yourself. That does not make you a bad mother. It makes you a person." He took her hand. "We're going to figure this out together. That is what partners do." So they created a new rhythm. One day a week, Ryder watched Robert while Clara went out with her camera. At first, she felt guilty every time she left, but gradually, she began to reclaim that part of herself. She photographed the spring wildflowers, the new calves in the pasture, the way the light hit the mountains at different times of day. And when she came home, she was a better mother for having had that time. As Robert grew from infant to toddler, Clara found ways to balance her various roles. She took photographs while he napped. She set up her darkroom so she could work while he played nearby. She learned that she did not have to be perfect at everything, that sometimes good enough was actually good enough, and Ryder was true to his word. He shared the parenting duties equally, changing diapers and soothing midnight tears and learning to make soft foods for when Robert started eating solids. He was a natural father, patient and playful, and Clara loved him even more for it. When Robert was 2, Clara's work was featured in a major photography exhibition in Denver. It was a significant achievement, recognition from the art world that her documentary photography was important and valuable. The organizers asked her to attend the opening, and Clara was torn. It was a 3-day trip, and she had never been away from Robert for that long. "You should go," Ryder said. "This is important, Clara. Robert and I will be fine." "Are you sure?" "I'm sure. Go show those city people what real frontier photography looks like." So Clara went to Denver, leaving detailed instructions and trying not to feel like she was abandoning her family. The exhibition was held in a grand gallery downtown. Her photographs hung alongside work from other documentary photographers. But Clara's images stood out. They had a rawness and honesty that the others lacked, a sense of actually being there rather than just observing from a distance. The exhibition was a success. Critics praised her work, and several major publications approached her about assignments. One magazine editor, a shrewd woman named Patricia Hendricks, offered her a regular column documenting ranch life in the American West. "You have a unique perspective," Patricia said. "You are documenting a way of life that is already disappearing. In 50 years, people will look at your photographs and see a world that no longer exists. That is important work, Mrs. Ashford. Clara accepted the column, negotiating terms that would allow her to work from the ranch and only travel when absolutely necessary. It was not the traditional career path she had once imagined, but it was hers, shaped to fit the life she had built. When she returned to the ranch, Robert ran to her on unsteady toddler legs, shouting, "Mama!" Clara scooped him up, breathing in his little boy smell, feeling complete again. "How was it?" Ryder asked. "Amazing, overwhelming. But I missed you both terribly." "We missed you too, but we are proud of you." Robert told everyone at the general store that his mama is an artist. Clara laughed. "He did not." "Well, I might have helped him with the words, but the sentiment was all his." Life continued its steady rhythm. Clara worked on her photography, documenting the changing landscape and the people who inhabited it. She photographed neighboring ranches, the town's growing population, the railroad construction that was slowly bringing the outside world closer. Her work appeared regularly in Eastern magazines, and she became known as one of the premier documentary photographers of the American West. Ryder thrived as foreman of the Double J. Under his management, the ranch prospered, its reputation growing throughout Colorado. When Jim Jenkins's health began to fail, he made Ryder a partner in the ranch, recognizing that the younger man had earned it through years of hard work and dedication. When Robert was 4, Clara became pregnant again. This time, the news felt different. She was not scared or uncertain. She was ready. She knew what to expect, knew she could handle it. The pregnancy was easier than the first, and when the baby arrived in late autumn, it was a quick labor. Another boy, this one with Clara's lighter coloring and Ryder's smile. They named him William Thomas, after Ryder's grandfather. Robert was fascinated by his baby brother, wanting to help with everything. Clara photographed them together constantly, capturing the bond forming between them. These images were among her most treasured, though she never published them. These were just for her family. The years passed in a blur of work and family, hard winters and beautiful summers, challenges overcome and victories celebrated. Clara's reputation continued to grow. She published a book of her photography titled The Living West, which was critically acclaimed and sold well. But she never let success pull her away from the life she had built. She traveled when she needed to, but always came home to the ranch, to Ryder and the boys. When Robert was 10 and William 6, Jim Jenkins passed away peacefully in his sleep. He left the ranch to Ryder and Clara, recognizing that they had become its heart and soul. It was an enormous responsibility, but also an honor. The Double J was theirs now, to shape and steward. "What do you want to do?" Clara asked Ryder the day after the funeral. They were sitting on the porch of their cabin, now expanded with an additional room and a proper darkroom attached. "Keep going," Ryder said simply. "Keep doing what Jenkins taught me. Run the ranch honestly, treat the land and animals with respect, take care of the people who work here, and build something that our boys can inherit if they want it. And if they do not want it, then they will find their own paths, just like we did." He looked at her. "We are going to support them no matter what they choose. That is what our parents did not do for us, and we are not going to make that mistake." Clara nodded. It was a promise they had made to each other long ago, before the boys were even born. They would give their children roots, but also wings. The boys grew up strong and capable, learning the ranch work from their father, but also their mother's eye for beauty and detail. Robert showed an aptitude for the business side of ranching, while William was more interested in the animals themselves. Clara taught them both photography, and while neither pursued it professionally, they both developed an appreciation for capturing meaningful moments. On their 15th wedding anniversary, Ryder surprised Clara with a trip. He had arranged for Margaret to come stay with the boys, and he took Clara back to the place where their story began. The high meadow where she had been kicked by the horse, where he had found her bleeding in the dirt. It looked different now. The landscape had changed slightly, trees growing where there had been open space, the meadow itself smaller. But the mountains were the same, eternal and magnificent. "Why did you bring me here?" Clara asked. "Because this is where I found you, where everything changed for me." Ryder took her hand. 15 years ago, I was just a cowboy riding the range, alone, content enough but not really happy. And then I found you, broken and bleeding, and somehow you became the most important thing in my world. I was so scared that day, Clara admitted, not just of dying, but of having come all this way and failed, of proving everyone right who said I could not make it on my own. But you did not fail. You built something extraordinary. Your work matters, Clara. It documents a time and place that is already vanishing, and you did it while also building a family and a life. You are remarkable. We built it together, she corrected. I could not have done any of it without you. They stood together in the meadow, holding hands, watching the sun set behind the mountains. Clara thought about the woman she had been 15 years ago, so determined to prove her independence, so convinced that love and ambition could not coexist. She had been wrong about so many things, but she had also been right about what mattered most, living life on her own terms, making her own choices, refusing to settle for less than everything. And she had found a partner who supported all of that, who saw her as a whole person, not just a wife or mother or photographer, but all of those things at once, complex and contradictory and completely herself. I love you, she said. I do not say it enough, but I do. I love you so much. I know, Ryder said, and I love you. Always have, always will. They made love that night under the stars, on a blanket spread in the meadow, with the mountains watching over them. It felt full circle somehow, a return to the beginning while also being entirely new. The years continued to pass, each one bringing its own joys and challenges. Clara's photography career remained strong into her 40s. She adapted as technology changed, embracing new techniques while maintaining her documentary style. She mentored younger photographers, especially women trying to break into the field, remembering how isolated she had felt in the beginning. Robert eventually took over much of the ranch management, proving to have his father's work ethic and his mother's creative problem-solving. He married a schoolteacher named Sarah, and they gave Clara and Ryder their first grandchild, a daughter named Clara Rose. William became a veterinarian, studying in Denver before returning to set up practice in Breckenridge. He remained unmarried longer, but eventually fell in love with a widow with 2 children, creating an instant family that he embraced wholeheartedly. Clara and Ryder grew older together, their bodies slowing, but their partnership as strong as ever. They spent their days working the ranch alongside their sons, playing with their grandchildren, and sitting together on the porch in the evenings watching the mountains turn purple in the twilight. On a warm evening in late spring, when Clara was 52 and Ryder 58, they sat together as they had countless times before. Clara's hair was now streaked with silver, and Ryder's face was weathered from years of sun and wind. But when they looked at each other, they still saw the people they had been that day in the meadow, the broken woman and the cowboy who saved her, the 2 lost souls who found each other. Do you ever wonder how different your life would have been if I had not been riding that circuit that day? Ryder asked. If I had not found you? Clara considered this. I suppose I would have found another way forward. I'm stubborn like that. But it would not have been as good, not even close. Same for me. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Clara Ashford. Morrison Ashford, she corrected with a smile. She had kept both names, professional and married, a small rebellion that still pleased her. And you are the best thing that happened to me, too. Their grandchildren ran through the yard shrieking with laughter while Sarah called them in for supper. Robert waved to his parents from the main house, and William's wagon pulled up, fresh from town. The ranch buzzed with life and family and purpose. Clara leaned against Ryder's shoulder, feeling his solid warmth, his steady presence. She thought about all the photographs she had taken over the years, all the moments she had captured and preserved. But this moment, right now, was one she did not need to photograph. She would remember it always, the feeling of home, of love, of a life fully lived. Thank you, she said quietly. For what? For finding me, for saving me, for building this life with me. Ryder pressed a kiss to the top of her head. Thank you for letting me. Thank you for being brave enough to come west in the first place. Thank you for surviving that kick and not giving up. Thank you for saying yes when I asked you to marry me. How could I say anything else? You splinted my ribs and held me while I was bleeding in the dirt. You saw me at my absolute worst and still thought I was worth saving. You were always worth saving, Clara. You just needed to see that yourself. They sat together as the stars began appearing, one by one, in the darkening sky. Inside the house, their family gathered for the evening meal. The ranch that was now their legacy stretched around them, prosperous and well-tended, and Clara and Ryder, the Eastern photographer and the Texas cowboy who had found each other against all odds, held hands and watched the night come on. They had decades more together, years of watching their grandchildren grow and adding more to the family tree. Clara continued photographing until her eyesight began to fail in her late 60s, and even then she supervised and mentored, passing on her knowledge and vision. Ryder remained active on the ranch until his 70s, finally consenting to let Robert and William take over fully only when his knees gave him too much trouble to spend full days in the saddle. When Clara was 74 and Ryder 80, they celebrated their 55th wedding anniversary with their entire extended family gathered at the ranch. There were children and grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren now, the family tree having branched and grown in ways they could never have imagined that Christmas Eve when they stood in the little church and promised to build a life together. At the anniversary celebration, Robert gave a speech. "My parents taught us that love is not about giving up who you are. It is about finding someone who helps you become more of who you already were meant to be. They showed us every day that you can build something together while still being your own person. That is the greatest gift they gave us, beyond this ranch, beyond the financial security, beyond everything else. They showed us how to love without losing yourself," Clara cried, which she rarely did anymore. Ryder held her hand, his grip still strong despite the arthritis that gnarled his fingers. That night, alone in their room in the expanded cabin that now sprawled comfortable and well lived in, Clara and Ryder lay together in the bed they had shared for 55 years. "We did all right, did we not?" Clara asked. "We did better than all right. We built something real, something lasting. I am glad you found me that day." "So am I, darling. So am I." Ryder passed away peacefully in his sleep 2 years later, at the age of 82. Clara held his hand as he drew his last breath, whispering that she loved him, that she would always love him. The grief was immense, oceanic, threatening to pull her under, but she was surrounded by family, by the life they had built together, and that kept her afloat. She lived 3 more years after that, long enough to see her first great-great-grandchild born, a boy with dark hair and gray eyes who reminded her achingly of Ryder. She spent those years organizing her photography archives, working with a curator from Denver to ensure her life's work would be preserved. Her photographs were eventually donated to the Colorado Historical Society, where they remain to this day, a testament to a vanishing world and the woman who documented it. Clara passed away on a spring morning when she was 79, sitting in her chair on the porch, looking out at the mountains she had loved for more than half a century. She went peacefully, a small smile on her face, her last thoughts of a cowboy who had found her bleeding in the dirt and held her while he splinted her ribs, who had saved her life in more ways than one. They buried her next to Ryder in the small cemetery on the edge of the ranch property, under the big sky with the mountains rising all around. The entire community came to pay respects to the woman who had captured their world in pictures, who had shown them the beauty and dignity in their everyday lives. At the funeral, William read from one of his mother's journals, an entry written shortly after she and Ryder had married. "I came west to prove I could make it on my own, to prove I did not need anyone. I was wrong about that, or at least half wrong. I can make it on my own. But I do not have to. There is no weakness in choosing partnership, in building something with someone else. The real strength is in being vulnerable enough to let someone see you at your worst and love you anyway. Ryder saw me broken and bleeding, and he stayed. That is what love is. Not the pretty moments, but the hard ones. Not when everything is perfect, but when everything is falling apart and you hold on to each other anyway." The words hung in the mountain air, true and lasting. Clara Morrison Ashford had lived a life of courage and conviction, of art and family, of independence and deep abiding love. She had refused to choose between her dreams and had instead found a way to have everything on her own terms. And in the end, when her great-grandchildren asked about her, they heard stories of a remarkable woman who had come west with nothing but a camera and a dream, who had been kicked by a horse and saved by a cowboy, and who had built a life and legacy that would endure for generations. They heard about a love story that began in blood and dirt and grew into something beautiful and lasting. They heard about two people who had been brave enough to be themselves and lucky enough to find each other. The Double J Ranch continues to this day, run by Clara and Ryder's descendants, still prosperous, still honoring the land and the legacy. And in the main house, in a place of honor, hangs one of Clara's photographs. It shows a wild horse herd running free across a high meadow, the mountains rising behind them, captured in a moment of pure freedom and grace. It was one of the last images she took before the accident, developed from one of the glass plates Ryder had salvaged and brought to her in the boarding house all those years ago. It is a reminder of where it all began, of a woman who refused to be anything less than fully herself, of a man who loved her for exactly who she was, of a love story that proved you do not have to choose between your dreams and your heart. Sometimes, if you are very lucky and very brave, you can have both.